Oh, all right. Welcome, everybody. We're back. Vintage House Live virtual series. Lori Branch, Lauren Lowry, and our guest for tonight, Vitigrrl. Thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Did you just say happy to be here? I thought you said meet somebody. Well, we know you. We know you. We love you. We so appreciate you being here tonight. Oh, look who's joining us.
The one, the only.
Mega. What's up, Mega?
The guy with the coolest glasses in town.
I'm in awe because look at me. There's one of me and three beautiful women.
You're in the good spot, Kev. You're in the good spot for sure.
Well, thank you all for joining us. We're really excited. We've been talking about having Hanna on the show for a while. Hanna, do you prefer that we call you Hanna or Vitigrrl or
Lori, you can call me anything. Just don't call me late for supper, as my grandma would say. But either or, either or.
What's up, Carl Branch? All right, so we'll call you Hanna, and if you want, we'll sort of go back and forth. But anyway, this is our guest, guys. If you're just tuning in, Vitigrrl, also known as Hannah Kate, also known as Hannah Viti. She's got a lot of names, like most of us DJs. She's been tearing up the scene, I think, for the last 3 years or so. Is it more than that?
No, you're right. You're right. Yeah.
About 3 years in Chicago DJ. We met on the set of WNUR 89.3 Evanston, Chicago, where we heard this young person who was just tearing up the turntables. And I think I was sitting with someone. It might have been one of our DJ friends in the other studio, and they're like, "Who is that girl?" And I was like, "That's Vitigrrl. She's bad." They're like, "Yes, she is." And then we found out that she's not only famous at WNUR, but she's doing all kinds of stuff all over the city, including being featured in the Chicago Tribune, which I found right after we met. I'm like, okay, so she's sort of a best kept secret that people are discovering. So we need to get her on our show before she's too famous to recognize who we are. So welcome.
Gassing me up.
I want to welcome everybody else who's tuning in. Hey, Reggie. Hey, Linda Red. Tilden Jones, Lisa Suzanne, Adrian Sky. What's up, Princess Hanna's in the house. All right, so without further ado, I want you to introduce yourself. If you could tell folks a little bit about who you are, and we'll start with how you do an open format. So talk about who you are. Let's just talk about who you are first. You're from Chicago. A little bit about where you grew up, and then we'll get into it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Hannah or Hannah, Vitigrrl, Viti, whatever you want to call me. Born and raised in Chicago on the north side. Very proud of, being a Chicagoan who spent their whole life here in the city. I went to Lane Tech, which I'm also quite proud of. My Lane Tech friends and alumni, what's up? And who am I? I am someone who is really passionate about community and conversation. And I use music as a way to, not only make a name for myself in the community, but connect with other people. I'm just finishing up my master's at Northwestern, which is where I met this fine team. And, I've always been someone who's obsessed with radio. That's another thing that I would say about me. It's just always been a way for me to, once again, connect and have community around music, and also to play stuff that, I want to hear, right? Like in the club or when you're out DJing, sometimes the pressure is on to keep everybody moving. And in the DJ booth at the radio, it's kind of about the journey that I want to take you on. And most of the time people seem to be pretty happy with where I take them. So, I'm a music lover. I'm very involved here in the queer community. I'm also very involved with advocates against rape, and do a lot of community service work as well. So yeah, I'm pretty proud and passionate to be from Chicago and to involve myself here.
Super. Thanks, Hannah. I know Lauren's got a ton of questions for you, but I'm going to start with a simple one. So what neighborhood, you went to Lane Tech. Lane Tech is not a school that we talk about high schools a lot on the Vintage House show, because so much house music energy started with kids in high school. and Lane Tech and high school and house music. And I know you do an open format, so we're going to get to that. But I want to hear more about like sort of your high school journey at Lane Tech. Were you introduced to it there? Were people housing out? It's not too long ago because you're only in your mid-20s.
Yeah, I graduated in 2012. And I was a big jock in high school. I was a 3-sport varsity athlete. So I spent a lot of my time doing sports, and my mom was always like, thank God it kept you out of trouble. But I swam, I played basketball, and I played water polo. And there was definitely, some house music. But, I was at a time where people weren't able to go to raves anymore. There weren't really the underground clubs that had happened before. I would say that people, my age were starting to get really into EDM. And I didn't love all the EDM I was hearing, but I loved more of like the super simplistic kind of 4 on the floor, some of the stuff that was still reminiscent to some classic house. And so I wouldn't say that when I was younger, like in high school at Lane, that I was listening to a ton of house. I was listening to a lot of Motown and funk and soul and world music. And as I got just a little bit older, I always had friends that were older than me. So friends in college and even people that were maybe 10 years my senior. And we would have some conversations about what I liked about EDM, but what I didn't. And they're like, well, you're part of the Chicago lineage, and really passed along a lot of records to me. So that's kind of, it wasn't huge in the 20 teens when I was at Lane, but I was introduced to so much cool world music and different kinds of music because Lane is, the biggest public school in the city. So you just had everything and everyone and an amazing music program and people that were really passionate about just allowing you to kind of get involved in other things that you would have never even known. So I had a great time at Lane. Yeah, it was a really, really cool place.
Lane Tech, so Reginald was just commenting, Reginald Davenport, Lynn Bloom in the house, because Lynn Bloom was actually Lane Tech's sister school. While we were there. I don't know if it was the same when you were there, but when we were, she's having a cocktail.
Come on.
Where's mine?
Yeah, come on.
Anyway, I love it. But we that was our sister school, because back when I was in high school, and Lauren, I think when you were in high school, we would talk about there's only a few high schools you could go to that were like technical high schools, where you had to sort of, there's equivalent to like the selective enrollment schools where you had to test in and all that stuff. And so you either went to Lynn Bloom if you were South, or you went to Lane if you were North, like basically Cermak, so.
Yeah. I've always found it funny. I guess that's a slightly different example, but people at Whitney or people at Jones or people at other schools, Kenwood, would always be like, yeah, Lane's our rival. Every single school would say that Lane's their rival. And we're like, yeah, we are a powerhouse, school of champions.
All right.
So, yeah.
Not too much bragging going on.
I'm proud of my experience there.
So I have a few questions, but I know Lauren can't stay with us the whole time. So I'm gonna let you ask some of the things on your list, because we want to talk a little bit about the history of we talk about the history of house music a lot. That's why we're called Vintage House. But I think what's important about having you on tonight, Hanna, is that you struck us with a spirit of someone who is like, sort of across generation, kind of a timeless feel, where you seamlessly integrate a lot of the older house music that really Chicago became known for, and sort of worldwide house music became known for. But you also obviously, you serve a younger audience, and you are younger yourself than the typical house music DJ. So I want to talk about sort of threading that needle. Like, how do we move, from this classic piece that we sometimes get stuck on, but that we also love, and that a lot of people, that's what they want to hear, to sort of advancing that, or just moving into the future as you have done so well. But Lauren, before we get into that, I'm going to let you ask some of those questions that you have for Hanna.
Well, I'll keep them very short. But, number one of the key things I miss about coming into the studio now is listening to Vitigrrl.
Yes.
I mean, one of the great things about Vintage House for me is that I get to come in every Wednesday and listen to fantastic house music. I get to listen to our guests, but also listen to the music. And to be able to come in when you arrived, Vitigrrl, we were just like, we don't know where did she come from? She is on fire every time we walked into the studio. So it was just such a pleasure to listen to you as we were setting ourselves up. We would just stop and listen to you, just in awe of, sort of the kinds of music you were playing, how you were playing it, your enthusiasm. So it was just a really powerful, time to be into the studio. So I really missed that.
Yeah,
But
that means
I want to talk a little Northwestern just for a second. So when you arrived at Northwestern, were you familiar with WNUR? Did you listen to WNUR while you were a student? I mean, while you were just a student in high school, or how did you become familiar with the station? Did you know you always wanted to be on there?
I definitely listened to it a bit growing up. Just being in Chicago, like I said, I was kind of radio obsessed. So I had it on, and it was something that I would tune into, and always was pretty impressed by kind of the programming and the quality of, DJs. But actually, I was the station manager of the college radio station that I went to for undergrad, which is DePaul, not DePaul, but DePaul in Greencastle, Indiana. So I really fell in love with college radio there. I used to have a show, it was 2 hours, and I would play one full album that had come out before 1990, and then one full album that had come out after 1990. So that wasn't, at that point, I wasn't really mixing, but I was kind of like, I would take the night before and read about the albums and try and get a lot of, tidbits or funny stories that maybe someone wouldn't, and really became obsessed with kind of just being in that studio and sharing music with people. And also to your point, Lori, about like the old versus new, like I loved having that back to back to kind of have something older and newer. So when I graduated college and I moved back to Chicago, I'm like, I got to get back on the radio, and kind of researched to figure out what that would look like. And I actually first went to WLUW, which is Loyola's radio station, and had a great time there. And that was right when I was actually first learning how to mix. So it was a really great experience for me to be able to go into that studio, and I was spinning some vinyl and bring my controller. And then when I decided to go to Northwestern, the first thing that I figured out was like, okay, well, I'm going to go to WNUR. And I didn't really feel super comfortable with CDJs at that point. It just wasn't like technology that I had a lot of proximity to. I couldn't afford CDJs. And it was
for the people who don't know what that is, can you talk about? Because sometimes we use a little DJ lingo.
Yeah, so CDJs we have in the studio at WNUR. I mean, they started out as an actual CD way to play your music. So if you understand the interface of turntables and a mixer, it's kind of like that, but digitized. Now we use USB sticks, and they have all, fancy kind of features. But at that point, I really didn't know how to use CDJs, but what I saw was that every club that I wanted to play at used CDJs, and controllers are awesome. And I'm sure we could talk about that debate. That's something that is always fun to listen to people talk about on your show. But
we'll talk about that.
Yeah. But for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to hold myself to it that every time I go into that studio, I'm going to use these CDJs. And it was like 3 weeks after my first, couple times using it, I got a gig at the Virgin Rooftop on CDJs, and I rocked it out because I had spent that time at WNUR. So, I that's kind of my journey into it. I'll tell you that, once it's safe to get back in there, I want to keep it up as a community DJ. I really value that time in the studio. I think it promotes kind of like creativity. It allows me to feel like I can practice things and try things out with the stakes aren't quite as high, but I'm a Capricorn, so I keep the stakes high for myself.
Any Capricorns out there? Hear from you.
Yeah. It is Virgo season.
It is Virgo season.
Yeah,
what's up, people? Yes.
A happy belated birthday, Lori.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Virgos, come on, Virgos represent. There's a lot of Virgos. I was noticing that, like.
We plan to sing happy birthday.
Get out of here.
Yeah, we got to do it.
We need a house music. Where's the house music happy birthday song? What's up?
We need to create one of those, producer. Who else's birthday this month is our Cordell. Cordell's birthday is the day after mine. Cindy Malone. What's up, Cindy? She's a Virgo.
Oh man.
Cordell's birthday. Tony Sheldon. There's a bunch of Virgos out there. When I was noticing. Yeah, so I think there's something about Virgo energy. If you're a Virgo, give it. Melody, are you a Virgo? All right, she said she's giving us love. But Capricorns are good. Capricorn is an earth sign. And actually, I get along very well with Capricorns. We we click like that. Charles Matlock is a Capricorn, Lauren. Where's he at?
His birthday's in December, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't know those signs. I only know Leo's, the best sign ever.
Oh, that's such a Leo thing to say.
Anyhow, thanks for the birthday love. So Kevin, you haven't had a chance to chime in. Let me
just
yield the floor.
I have one magical question for Hannah, and that is Vitigrrl and the handle. How did it come about, and what does it represent?
Yeah. So originally when I first started out, I was going by DJ V, and then I did some research and realized there was already another house DJ V. I've always been really proud and excited about my last name. It's Italian, kind of comes from life, which I think is just a fun kind of representative of like my personality and passion when I'm in the zone, when I'm DJing. I mentioned earlier that I played a lot of sports, and a lot of times, you get called by your last name. I was never just Hannah. I've always been Hannah Viti. I'm one of those first name, last name people. So I wanted that to kind of come through. And the girl, I've had a lot of conversations with different, female women DJs, and it's interesting to kind of hear different people's perspectives on, if they want to kind of be gender neutral, or if like Lady D, if it's something that they kind of want to represent. And I guess for me, I was in the school of thought that, I'm proud of my gender and proud to represent a different flair and a different flavor in kind of a male dominated industry. And it's playful. And it just felt like something to be proud of. And then the two R's are just kind of like, house techno. Sometimes it's got a little edge to it, right? It can get a little gritty. It can get a little like, so kind of a nod to like Riot Girl and kind of like some fun kind of punk energy that has come before me. And I feel like, house and dance music in the best way is like some urban punk energy. So that's kind of what I hope to bring to the table when I play.
Yep. Thank you for that, because definitely I concur with Lauren. When arriving, even before walking into the studio, I've got NUR tuned in on the car radio and hear you banging the decks. The energy is infectious, and definitely understand why we had to have you on the Vintage House Show, because your appreciation for music definitely shines through. So,
well, thank you.
Yep, keep the fire burning.
I promise.
You mentioned something. So you brought up a lot of I like. Is the time for politics, right? We have and this term identity politics always comes up whenever there's time to vote and how people vote and who they care about. We won't get too deep into that unless we want to. I'm happy to go there because I'm reading some interesting books right now. But do you think there's identity politics in the DJ world? And if so, can you speak to that? Because you mentioned the term queer, you mentioned the term feminine, and you didn't say feminist. I derived feminine.
You can use that. You can use that word.
what you're saying. But can you talk about, we talk about women in DJ, and we're talking specifically house music. From what you've seen, you're very relatively fresh on this scene.
Absolutely.
So what you've experienced as a woman, what you've experienced, DJing for queer crowds or LGBT crowds. I'd love to hear your thoughts on sort of, how those intersections work in your world and what you've observed.
Yeah, absolutely. I am relatively new to the scene, and I think I've arrived in an era where a lot of people have put in a lot of work before me. And, even you and Lady D and DJ Tess and other people that that were really instrumental in kind of not only me being able to be up there, but being able to be confident and feeling like I had a support system. So I feel like I've arrived at a time where, you know, women DJs are really kind of taking over the world. I mean, from like DJ Rashida to Peggy Goo to you know, the Black, she changed her name. It's not Black Madonna.
Black Madonna.
Yeah,
Right.
but she changed her name. What is it? The Blessed Madonna.
All right.
To, you know, just there, I think I've blessed to have arrived at a time where some people have done a lot of work that I'm able to kind of reap some of the benefits of. You know, house music is also, you know, Black music, and a lot of the roots are come from soul and legacies of, you know, Black people who have worked really hard to be on that stage and to get up there. And I know that when I play, that this is a music that I understand the history of it. And I think that that was really important to me, that if I was going to be in those places and I was going to play these songs, and, you know, so much of house music like is about identity, and whether that's about love or, you know, acceptance or God. There's a lot of really deep, you know, deepness in house that goes across the board. And so for me, it's been important, and it's been part of my journey to make sure that I know what I'm talking about, know what I'm spinning, understand who's come before me, understand like the sacredness that is the dance floor. And I think, like, once again, there's been a lot of people who have done the work. There's books on it. There's documentaries, you know, there's artist interviews. So I've kind of, you know, to be the person that I want to be, especially with the identities that I carry, it's been important to me to know, to understand fully like the legacy that I represent, which is why Vintage House, I think, is such an important show, no matter what your age or if you're a DJ or a fan, because there is so much to talk about. You can take stuff at surface level, or you can choose to really get deep with it. My queer identity, I think house music is such a great place to kind of to live in that. You know, I know that there's sometimes, you know, differences and tensions, and that's how life is, right? Like, not everyone's going to always understand someone else's perspective and identity. But I've actually found, I don't always love this word diverse. It's kind of a buzzword, but I really have found the dance floor to be some of the most accepting and unique and the diverse places to be at. And I mean that through race. I mean that through sexuality. I also mean through age. You know, like, I have friends that are in their 40s and 50s, and we have a connection because they're both house heads. And I really think that's part of the culture of house. And I think that without, you know, being a jerk, like some of the younger, kind of more EDM, even some techno, not all techno, but newer techno, I think sometimes that's missing, right? Like, I think the commitment to having acceptance for all the different identities, not that you have to understand the identity, but at least the acceptance. That's something that I think I really want to, you know, help be a role model for other house, you know, newer house DJs, to kind of keep that spirit alive.
Right. So Cliff, thank you, Hannah. I appreciate that. I want to get a little bit deeper into especially what we're talking about in terms of queer culture, because it is something that we talk about sort of surface, and every now and then we get to go a little bit deeper. But you know, as a history of house, but also as the future of house, you know, sort of how does the queer community fit into the future of house, when it was really the queer community from where the house culture sprang. So we could go there now if you want, but I do want to address Cliff's question, because I had the same thought, Cliff. I never thought of house music as being Black but more race neutral. I would say that I didn't necessarily think of it being, I think of it as being sort of rooted in Black music. But when I think of house music in Chicago house music, it really did feel like a fusion of Black music and, you know, sort of what's coming out of Europe, what was sort of the punk scene. You know, it was the younger generation who was not tied to the R&B sound, you know, that really wanted to sort of, you know, give it some heat. And so we borrowed, you know, from other cultures to create what we know as house music.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's so many people that weren't, that represent so many different racial identities that I think have played a huge part in house. I mean, look at Super Jane, that melting pot of women. Louis Vega. I mean, there's just so many different people that bring a lot of different identities, and I completely agree with that. But, I think about some of my favorite house music. You guys know, you've heard me jamming. I love gospel house, and other house that, there isn't a huge legacy of white DJs or white producers. And so I guess my point was just that I think that it's important to know your stuff, right? Like, to understand who made this, and not that, like, I can't or shouldn't spin that. That's not what I mean. But I just try to inform myself as much as possible so that I have an understanding of, like, the legacy that has come before me when I, in 2020 play a record. Like, okay, this didn't just come out this year. This has a whole, 30 years of life.
But you're attracted to that sound. So it's interesting that you're attracted to a sound that could be 30, 40 years old. So there's something in you. I mean, listen, there's great music of all eras. I was not born in the 40s, but I love Billie Holiday, and I love so much music that came before my time. Mm-hmm. But to sort of bring it forward and to make it current, and to, like, I'm not playing Billie Holiday in my sets,
right?
But I think that, what's cool is, sort of talking about that thread, sort of moving from one generation of music that is still very much, present in us. But to have someone who's young embrace that and then sort of move it forward. What motivates you to do that? And do you see other examples of people like yourself? We get a lot. Corky Tracksman talks about this a lot. It's like, how are we moving this forward? And so when I think about how we're moving this forward, whatever that this is, I think what we're talking about is how do we evolve house music in Chicago like it has evolved in other places? What's holding us back? And what are your thoughts on sort of the through line between the past and the future?
It's a good question.
That's a heavy question.
Yeah,
right?
No, but it's important though.
It is, and I think it lends itself well to where Cliff was going with his comment, in that it may not necessarily be that it's. I mean, Black artists have definitely attracted people from a variety of perspectives and cultures, right? Mm-hmm. And so house music, no different, in that it attracts a variety of races and ethnicities and interests. And I think age is a dimension, Lori, that you're intimating here around how 40 and 50-year-olds today typically are the demographic most associated with house music. But in moving it forward, 40 and 50-year-olds are going to become 60 and 70-year-olds and eventually, pass on. So how do we keep that succession going around the love and the culture and the energy that is house music? That may be another way of positioning the.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that pops to my mind is a little bit difficult in this current moment that we're in, but and I don't mean this with any disrespect, and I know that there's venues on different sides of the city that I haven't been to, but aside from like Smart Bar, the Lodge, maybe a couple bars downtown, like I feel like the places where we actually are going to go to listen to house music are not always promoting that same kind of intergenerational feeling. And it's not because the venue is doing anything wrong per se, but when I go visit New York, or when I visit other cities that have a pretty big house following, I feel like there's a lot more places where house is happening and where DJs are spinning. And I think actually being in that shared environment and realizing like, oh wait, there's actually a lot more in common that's making us dance than we think. Like, I feel like just, getting on the dance floor with someone and grinding it out or footworking or doing these things that bring us, connect us to the music. Like that for me in those moments, like age isn't really as much of a thing. It's the other stuff, like getting to the venue. What's the timing like? Where's the, is this a place that only young people go or only older people go? Like, I think it's everything else that we create that keeps these barriers. It's not the music itself.
Right.
Is
there a scene in Chicago where there are 20-something-year-olds who are digging house music? Where is that? Do you play for these people?
So, I think there are, once again, going back to some of this identity stuff, I think that a lot of the events that I'm going to are kind of, LGBTQ things, or they are a little bit older, quote unquote, older househead stuff. And to your point, that's because I personally just kind of like the music better a little bit in some of those spaces with some of the classics. And I'm not seeing quite as many young people. So I think that's a good thing to think about. Like, how do we make these kinds of spaces inviting? And you know what? Maybe the stream, maybe like Twitch and some of these platforms are allowing. Like, it'd be interesting to see the data if there was on streaming age, because I wonder with the barriers of, does the venue feel right? How do I get there? Like, are people just attracted to the music no matter what? And it's everything else that's getting in the way. I know there are bars downtown, Spy Bar and spaces inviting. And you know what? Maybe this I just heard myself like but I know that there are some of those spaces, but like those don't always feel the most inviting to me, or I feel like I have to walk into a space and worry about like a guy being, too handsy, or so I think I've had to make decisions based on where am I going to feel like I can really let go and dance? Because when you're a househead, like we dance different. We dance with everything we got. And there only are a few spaces for me that I feel I can fully go there on that dance floor. And I don't know if there's a bunch of 20-year-olds dancing to house somewhere that I'm not aware of, but I want to get there. There was this new club called I don't even know. I saw Peggy go there, but there's some stuff, but I think things seem to be kind of pocketed, dispersed.
Is it more event-based?
Yeah.
So if you go to New York, or if you're around, I travel a bit, but I don't go out a lot. I'm traveling for business, or maybe I'll DJ here or there. But, are there more physical spaces in other cities, than there are in Chicago for house music?
I would say yes. When I go visit New York, I mean, there's so many different places where I could see house. And once again, like, what do we mean by house? Because there's a lot of places that are playing kind of like tech house, kind of like a techno meets house. There are a lot of places that are playing, drum and bass. Are there a lot of places that are playing our like classic vintage house? Maybe not, but maybe you'll hear a DJ who will sprinkle some in. Pardon me. But yeah, I do think that it is kind of interesting that there aren't quite as many like club venues in Chicago. And right now, I think we'll see even more close, which is fresh. Like, it's sad.
Why is that?
Well, I don't know if they're going to be able to sustain the pandemic. Yeah, I mean, like Nocturne, I was super happy with the program, and still am really happy with the programming that they're doing. And I actually have been to some parties at Nocturne that I am seeing looks like a pretty multi-generational, multiracial, and queer and straight. Like, I think that space, that energy, I know only been around a little bit, but I was feeling that there in ways that I haven't felt that in other places.
I think you talked about some party. I want to talk about your open format, sort of the way that you spin. So we touch on that here and there, and that one of the reasons why we can't have these parties that go all night like we used to is that they were disco/house music parties, but there was a rhythm that kind of, you went on a journey with the DJ. And you weren't pounding it out all night long. Even if it was up tempo, there was down tempo, up tempo that you could sort of groove to. And then, there's a peak of the party where everybody's kind of in a frenetic space. And then it kind of goes back down and goes back up. Now you do kind of an open format, which is a little bit different. Talk about your work sort of, why you do that and where you do that. Maybe you can talk about Slo-Mo and some of the other work that you do where you do that.
Absolutely. I think I alluded to it earlier. I mean, house has become my true love, but growing up, I wasn't listening to house a ton. I was listening to my parents' records. I was listening to Michael McDonald and Steely Dan and Fleetwood Mac. And like I said, I got really into soul and funk. And I just became obsessed with trying to just hear, like the process of discovery. How can I hear as much stuff that I've never heard before? And in doing that, I've really grown to love so many different genres. And in growing to love house, I think you also see the influence of so many different genres, new wave, punk, funk, soul, world music, Afrobeat. Like there's so much there to riff off and bring into context with so many other different types of music. I really love the idea of, having a set that kind of ebbs and flows. I love the idea of someone coming up to me after and saying, I've never heard that song. What was it? I've seen some DJs, I think we feel pressure that we have to play like banger after banger that everyone's going to know. And in my mind, like one of the beautiful things of a DJ is like to bring you stuff you've never heard of, or to play it in a way that it sounds totally different or unfamiliar. And so I think for me, those moments of playing something totally unexpected and blending that perfectly into maybe something that someone feels a little more comfortable with. For me, it's all about helping people, feel comfort and feel joy and then feel surprise. Like it's emotional work when you're DJing, right? I think, and I think to be able to kind of coax someone into so many different kind of feelings is powerful. So Slo-Mo, we, right now things are a little different on the internet, but before Slo-Mo was in its 10th year and every third Thursday. And Slo-Mo started Kristen Kaza and DJ Tess. And the idea was that there wasn't really a lot of places where people could go and listen to slower music like R&B, soul. It's gone on for 10 years. It's become a lot of people's homes. I first started going when I was like, not even 21, but Kaza knows now, so it's fine. But, and I just loved how DJs were playing different stuff. And I think once again, that goes back to what I said about it being emotional. Like there's that moment when you can see in someone's eye, like that you have just played their freaking song and they are just so like, just elated and free and light. And, I never know what's going to do that for someone. And I think when you play diverse stuff, you're more likely to find that thing. So I loved that, on WNUR, I would use the whole hour to play house. And when I have those gigs, I'm excited to play all the way house.
By the way, we're not on NUR, so you can, you can let loose.
I can actually
no
swear.
Jump button requirement going on.
True. But yeah, so when I have the opportunity to play a house set, my friends, they're all like, oh, you were so excited to play our house. They can tell that it was great for me. But, I get bookings that I can tell they don't want me to play house for the full hour. And so I'll do my best to sprinkle a little house beat here or there.
What would you play if you have an hour to spend and they don't want you to play house? Give us an example of what a set like that would entail. Like just walk us through.
That's a good question. Well, if they don't want me to play house, I'm hoping that they still want me to play disco because I'll definitely give them.
Do they know the difference?
Good question. But, more of the Sister Sledge, Patrice Rasheen, like that kind of a vibe. That's great for Slo-Mo. I love some like trip hop, some really funky, cool beats is a great way to kind of bring you from kind of one area to another. I'm really inspired by some newer stuff that maybe they wouldn't think is house, but kind of has some house inspiration. FKA, Little Dragon is one of my favorite new artists. Yeah, she is so cool and doing some really amazing things. And then, everyone loves like a classic like Bill Withers cut or just something that gets everyone up on the dance floor. I like to kind of go, like I said, go in between something that you're super familiar with that gets you up grooving. And then once I've got you, I try and play something that maybe you haven't heard, but I can tell if you liked that song, then this will probably get you going. I love African music. I love bachata and stuff that you can really let go and dance to.
Craig Loftus we were hanging out this weekend, and he was saying something very similar. He was saying that DJs are alchemists, that DJs don't realize it, but that they're all sort of alchemists. They have this ability to create something that did not exist before, but by that magic that they can do when they are good, on a dance floor, good or average, whatever. If you're a decent DJ, you can do that. You can create.
It's interesting because there's also been a lot of debate and discussion around the playing of music, maybe that is familiar versus the unfamiliar and new, and the DJ as the educator, right? Bringing people up to speed on some of the newer music and newer releases. And so there's a lot of dimensions and a lot of work that DJs really have to perform. As you shared, Vitigrrl, the opportunity to really move someone in one or multiple emotional directions is indeed one of the most powerful feelings that a DJ can give and get back, right? As they do what we call work, but it's really a passion.
Absolutely. And, it's something that I take seriously, you could invoke a really amazing, joyful emotion in someone, or maybe you played the song that was, someone's song with their partner and their partner just passed away. I think music holds so much power. Music is memory, music, just like when you smell something and it brings you back to your dad barbecuing on the grill. Like, I feel like it's sensory information, so it can do that same thing. And it's to be treated with respect, in my opinion.
You are a dancing DJ, and Lauren likes to talk about dancing DJs. There's a few of you out there, you, Melvin Gentry, a few others.
Oh yeah, Melvin goes,
he just goes all the way off.
Start taking the shirt off.
I know. I'm like, where'd he go? Well, he's on the dance floor. So you can do that and focus on your mix and dance at the same time. I'm always impressed by that, because I kind of got to be still a little bit when I like, transitioning. How do you do that?
I mean, I've often watched you and been like, gosh, I wish I could look as cool as Lori. I mean, sometimes I feel like I honestly look a little dorky when I'm doing my thing, but it's how I feel it. It's how I stay on, helps me stay on the rhythm. It helps me feel it. I think the times that I have my best sets are when I'm like I said earlier, I'm DJing because I want to evoke emotion, but that starts with me and my emotion, and I can tell when my body is moving before my mind is even moving, that I'm onto something good. I think I'm just, I'm passionate about it. Yes. I started this thing because I loved music so much. I've never gone into it saying I want to, even be a full-time DJ, which I'd love to, but or expect for it to be. I've never looked at it like a job. I'll say that. I've looked at it as a chance for me to spin and connect. And I think that starts with my own body first. And, I decided that I wanted to be a DJ, one, because of radio, and two, because I loved dance floor so much. And I've always just felt most myself on the dance floor. So even if I try, I've had some of these streams where I'm watching the DJs before me and they just look so calm and cool, and I get on there and I'm like, from the very beginning, it looks like I've got ants in my pants, but that's just how I feel it, and I can't really stop myself. So I'm just gonna keep on shaking it all.
It's all good. I appreciate it. Every now and then I get in the mood. But it's one of those things where if I go too far off, I'm like, okay, wait, let me focus. Make sure I'm not galloping horses here.
Yeah, that's real.
So you alluded a little bit earlier to the controller versus the CDJs versus wax. It is something that we talk about. And for those of you who are not familiar with all of these different formats that we use, DJs started with records, right? And then they moved to CDs. So actually, probably, you know, even before records, DJs were using reel to reel. We used to use text. We used all kinds of stuff to, you know, figure out how to get our blend in. And now everything is sort of distilled down to either, you know, your computer or a flash drive. What's your preferred method and why?
Great question. You know, my preferred method would probably be CDJs. There's something about the way that the tactileness, the way they feel when it hits, the way you can just manipulate them. And I think, you know, I associate them with clubs and house. And so it feels right. You know, I have turntables at my house, and I've been actually practicing vinyl a lot over, I would love one Lori tip session, but I've been practicing a good amount over quarantine. When I first started, I really wanted to be like, I thought it would be so cool if I only played vinyl. Give me an edge and be really sexy and different. And I still think vinyl is amazing, and it's something that I want to continue to keep getting better at and feeling confident about. But I'm also kind of a perfectionist, and when I train wreck, it's hard for me sometimes to recover. Now I'm much better with it, but when I was first learning, I really was kind of struggling getting vinyl down, and knew that this was something I wanted to do. And so a friend was like, "Well, as you continue to learn vinyl, just start playing with the controller." And I got that in like 2 days. So what that did was it allowed me to actually start getting out there, you know, and putting myself out there and taking gigs. I like that the controller I'm a visual person, so sometimes that can be nice, but also when I'm going to a gig and they don't have equipment for me and they don't have CDJs, it allows me to take some gigs that maybe weren't always set up for DJs. So I like the freedom of that. But once I got the CDJs down, nothing beats the CDJs for me. And I've got a little fund going where I save like $5 every, couple of weeks. So I don't have a ton in it yet because they're very expensive. I mean, DJ equipment is very expensive. It's an expensive
It absolutely is. So, she's going to put up a GoFundMe or PayPal for Hannah's DJ fund so she can get those CDJs. They are very expensive. So no kidding.
Yeah. But for me, I remember Lady D said to me once, she was like, "Hannah, it really doesn't matter what you play. Just know how to play everything. Because the thing is, if you're calling yourself a DJ and if your equipment breaks and you're at the club and and you don't know how to do anything else," she's like, "Well, then you're going to be in trouble. But, hold your head high, play what you have in front of you, and don't, if people want to pass judgment, well, I mean, whatever."
Well, what are your thoughts on the sync button?
Oh, I don't use it. For me, especially a controller. So on a controller, it makes it so easy that I feel like, no offense, if you're using the sync button, you're taking half of your job out. So I personally don't use it. I know sometimes if I got 3 CDJs up there and you're trying a really wild instrumental loop or something kind of crazy, like I try not to throw stones at what an artist is doing. To each their own. I just feel like I also remember Lady D being like, if I come over there and you're using the sync button, she's like, you don't want any, senior elder DJ to see you using the sync button.
You don't want to, you can use it, but just don't let anybody.
Yeah, she's like, don't let anyone see you doing it. So for me,
and the sync button, for those of you who are watching, the sync button is if you are using a computer to DJ, there's an actual button that you can press that just automatically syncs the pace, the tempo for each song. So it doesn't require like skill when you see people like pitching, trying to get, it's a little technical, but it's a way to cheat. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah. And you know what? Maybe the DJs has it on because they have like a Roland 808 drum machine or a synthesizer, and they're doing some other really cool stuff with it. But in general, I mean, if you're up there DJing, I think you'd want to be able to manipulate it more.
That's right. Albert says, I think there's a difference between hating and objectively. So, okay, I agree.
Yeah.
You can be that way. So, this hour is going by so quickly. So listen, if you have questions for Vitigrrl, go ahead and post them up. She is, I want to talk a couple things before we run out of time. It's already like 48 minutes. Can you believe it? So you were featured in the Chicago Tribune, which was really cool. So for, someone who's kind of fresh out the gate, I think you've been spinning for like maybe a year and a half. how did that come about, and what did that feel like to see that big article with
It
you in it?
was huge. It was totally huge. To this day, I'm not even fully sure kind of how it came to be. I got a phone call from Britt Julius, who's an amazing, amazing writer, and her work really speaks for itself. I think that they wanted to interview kind of up and coming sound people in the city. And, in addition to my DJing, I'm also a podcaster and I'm an audio engineer and I produce. So, DJing, while it's probably the heart and soul of my sound work, it's one of the many things that I'm committed to in sound. So I think that provided a really interesting dialogue, and I can't even explain how it felt. I mean, it was really like, it felt totally surreal. And, after college, I spent, 2 years really trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to do. And a lot of the things that I excel in are kind of like unconventional things compared to other people my age, or maybe folks that I graduated college with. And, my grandma didn't fully understand what it was to be a DJ. My parents kind of got it. Now they do. But to be able to, my grandma called me after getting the Tribune, and she has that framed in her bathroom, in her guest bathroom. So everyone who uses the bathroom in her house has to see it. So yeah, it felt really, really amazing to be able to kind of to show them that there is a world for this, and it's something to be proud of. So it was really, really huge.
All right, so thank you. Cliff asked a good question, and it's something we have to address. Cliff, honestly, I get tired of having this conversation, but I think it is worth having because I'm still seeing lineups with all male DJs. Like I just open up my Facebook feed and I'll see parties, and 9 of them have all male DJs with folks like Vitigrrl and DJ Lady D and so many others, Melody and the list goes on and on. Mimi Hughes, so many great DJs out there not getting called upon. So, what are your thoughts on this question? Have male DJs have or not accepted you? What's your thoughts on the whole male female thing?
I mean, it's layered. I think similar to you all having fond memories of our mutual, studio connection. It was so cool for me because, kind of like y'all just said, all of these amazing house legends would come in right at the end of little old me playing, and they were all their faces kind of looked like you guys did in the beginning. Like, you're like, what? Like, who is this? What's going on? And I think the music and the ability speaks for itself. So I think when people, especially a lot of these like legends, men in the community, especially that had come in and seen me through Vintage House, they were totally accepting. I know Vernell wanted my number to book me. Other situations where people haven't heard me play and they just look at me, that's a little bit of a different story. I think the music speaks for itself, and that's how I like to kind of be judged, right? Like based on my abilities and my taste in music rather than anything else. I've had some people like John Simmons, who from right in the beginning, he's a DJ mentor of mine. And before I even knew how to mix, he just knew my selection and the songs I was obsessed with. And he's been a huge supporter of me as a DJ from day one. So I think there's been definitely some men that stand out to me as people who really have accepted me and cared. But once again, it was because they saw that I was, really trying to be the real deal. I remember I had a gig. I won't name the club, but it was a huge club for me to play at. And I played with another woman who's also like blonde and around my age. And we're kind of, younger looking, and we had just finished and we went upstairs to just get a little fresh air, and tried to go back in the club, and the security guard asked to see our IDs, and we had just walked out, and we're like, we actually just DJ'd, and he was totally like, what? It was super awkward. So, I think there's moments when we judge a book by their cover and not by the content that it gets tricky, but I do feel blessed that people have really seemed to accept me, especially when they hear me play. So,
speaking of playing and cool clubs, Lady D and I and Vitigrrl happened to play one of the best last parties before the shutdown, I have to say. So can you talk a little bit about, what we're trying to do with Good Girls and maybe a little bit about Arbella, because honestly, everybody that I've talked to was like, that's the last best party that I went to. And I know
Yeah.
people are still partying during the pandemic, but it's a very different feel with the social distancing and the masks. And, you know, some of the outdoor sets are pretty cool, but that was some special stuff going on there. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
I mean, it feels like a total dream come true for me. I mean, two people that I've looked up to so much, not only for their abilities, but also the things they've done in their careers and their commitment to community. You and Lady D, it was amazing to be kind of asked to be part of this. Lady D wanted to start a fest called Good Girls. And the focus was kind of what we said earlier, like seeing all these festivals and events with 9, 10, men on the lineup, but not even one woman to represent. And so her idea was like, screw it. Let's start a festival that really represents, women and non-binary people, basically the people that aren't getting booked in the same way. Mm-hmm. And her idea was to kind of form a little core members, and that, as things grew, we would bring other people on. And I was blessed to be kind of the young blood that was on the team. And I think the idea is to kind of, bring kind of that same vintage house style, but also allow ourselves to bring some other elements and of house music. I know I was bringing some techie stuff sometimes, and everyone was really grooving. Arbella was beautiful. It felt like something that we don't see a ton, where there's a beautiful dance floor that actually people were really into, but there's also great cocktails and a great vibe. I think it's something like what I was saying earlier that I don't see a ton, where older and younger generations could probably both feel pretty comfortable occupying that space. There were moments when it felt like a cocktail party, and then it got real sweaty and fun. So I know that we are hoping to do some online stuff. And then maybe even do some outside stuff as we keep evolving. Personally, it's been a little bit hard for me to have the same passion and energy for some of these streams. As much as I love the ones I've done, it's when we talk about evoking emotion, it's been kind of hard for me to connect with that part of DJing on the live stream. Mm-hmm. I've really had a lot more fun kind of working on mixes that I'm releasing and things like that. But I hope that we can kind of keep that going, because I had so much fun, and it's kind of a dream come true to play with you too. And I think it'll be fun to go to other cities one day.
Honestly, look, it's a mutually beneficial situation when we do intergenerational stuff in house music. It really is. It feeds me. I know it feeds Lady D. I know it feeds a lot of folks, when you have folks who are new, younger or new to it. So I know Miko was saying that he's been playing for 1 year. I want to play with you, dude. So when you get here and we can party together, we'll make that happen. But I think it's important because even if you're older, and I see that in quotes, if you're in your 40s or 50s, and you're just really discovering that this is a artistic outlet that you want to explore, you're bringing something fresh to it as well. So I'm not stuck in like only people who've been doing it for 20, 30 years can do it. I think that if you have the talent and the time and the passion for it, anyone can do it.
And to your question earlier, like that's how we evolve. I think that because that people come see me or they come see you, and then in turn they're listening to both. And I have some friends that I know that never would have considered themselves house heads or house fans. And then after they're like, what was that track? I'm like, it's Jamie Principle, so I think that's exactly the key to this evolution, because if we stay kind of within our own age range or races or even gender, like the beautiful crossover of music, and we're going to lose that. And, I know that you play tracks sometimes, and I'm like secretly in the corner Shazamming them, or you'll come up and ask me for a song. And I've even heard like vice versa. I remember you being like, I played this track that I heard from you in my mix. So, then you think about all the people that are getting to listen to that wouldn't if we hadn't have kind of had that time together. So I think that is how we evolve. And I've been so appreciative of you, Lori, and also you, Kevin and Lauren, for, welcoming me into this kind of wonderful crew family and helping me continue to meet so many other people that have passed on so much great knowledge. So it's really a pleasure.
Definitely. Discovery is, certainly a an element of the culture that is house music, being able to discover people. Back in the day, it was a little bit about, the fashion, and certainly at the core of it is the music and the opportunity to really entrench yourself in music that touches you in amazing and different ways, and cultivates a feeling of peace and unity. I think that's
absolutely.
when we talk about house music, we talk about it, having all of these characteristics and attributes.
Absolutely.
Great. Lauren, I know you're wanting to say something before we wrap up.
Yeah, I definitely just wanted to, really talk just a little bit about sort of, you see the future. You have a unique sort of place in this music genre. Being a young person, you are already sort of integrating, sort of intergenerational house music. But you have a special place because you are really getting the kind of love that is, really important for the future of the music. And your interest in history and your interest in sort of respecting the evolution of the music is critically important. I'm wondering about your thoughts on sort of the future. You're getting some good gigs. The city is on board. What you're doing, your talent and skill are really bringing you to the next level. And I can see it going extremely far. And then you're being able to bring some other people with you on that, that larger, sort of trip down career in this industry. But what are your thoughts on your career? I heard you sort of mentioning your interest in sound, but does that translate to a global career in house music, which is extremely lucrative? You already have seen, how it can, how the music can advance your career. If you did the right things, you could be even huger. What are your thoughts on what you want to do and sort of how that impacts sort of the future of house? If you stop, I'm wondering about that.
Oh, I appreciate that. I mean, I definitely deeply want to keep DJing until I die. I think that we've talked. I know Lori and I have had this conversation that in order to kind of get some of those global bookings, festivals, other countries, like I think you kind of got to start producing stuff just the way that streaming services or people buy and sell and get to know people. So I think that's definitely on my next year plan. I would love to produce something that I felt really proud of. I've played around with some of these softwares and started working on some stuff, but I think kind of bringing all these genres that I love so much and trying to create a track that I felt like, was house, but whatever the adjective or identifier of the house would be kind of unknown or new. So I think definitely producing something. I also want to keep this love of radio alive. So not only do I want to DJ on dance floors, but I want to continue having places like these. Maybe I interview other people. Maybe I, get a podcast. Maybe I get a, gig that could lead to something like the BBC radio. I'm deeply interested in interviewing people. I like to call myself a sonic historian. Lori Branch is also one. You all are sonic historians in my book, but I want to do this work of kind of uncovering, identities and communities through music, and maybe that means writing a book, or maybe that means getting a PhD. These are all things that I think about. But as far as DJing, I used to produce and promote a lot more parties, and I kind of took a step back from that because I was like, I really want to focus on, becoming the best DJ that I can be. So I know that is still very at the top of my list of goals, is just becoming better and better and better. And once again, that Capricorn energy, like just practicing until, my hands fall off. But I think producing a track would kind of get me to that direction, that I could kind of try and get some bookings. I've always said that my goal was going to happen this spring, but of course it got canceled, was to play a gig in another city, and I was going to play in LA. So I felt like that was a great first step. So I really appreciate, your sentiment. And I think it's a good thing to keep in mind, like, why limit ourselves when it's important to think about the biggest goal possible. And I'd love to be able to say I'm playing in Ibiza. Lauren, Kevin, you're coming.
Hey, we'll be there. Listen,
We will be there for
I want to
sure.
say this. I think obviously there's plenty of room to grow. I like to stay present. I like to, there's something about constantly striving for the next level that just feels like a hamster, in a circular, whatever that thing is called.
Yeah.
I think that we have to appreciate where we are. You know what I mean? That you are doing amazing stuff. And, like the movie Is This As Good As It Gets? It might be. And if it is, it's pretty cool. Like that last party at Arbella, if it was going to be a last party before the pandemic, that was fun.
It was a
where
great
you had
party.
everybody all together, grooving, jamming, and loving it. And of course, it doesn't mean and there's more to come.
Yeah.
And you, as Lauren said, you have a special place. Clearly, you touched our lives and our hearts, and you're touching the lives and hearts of a lot of people. And it's because you're coming from a place of respect and admiration, and you're coming from, and this community needs so much more of. So I appreciate the energy that you bring. I appreciate the love that you give. It is well received and very much needed.
Thank
So,
you.
Hannah, I want to thank you. I want to give you an opportunity to, if there's something else that we missed, I know there's plenty more we could talk about. We never talked about, well, there's so many things, but what did we
Gotta have
miss?
her back.
Yeah, well, you'll come back and we'll, we were being polite this time, but we get a little raunchy and we talk about fun things like we'll do that next time.
Yeah, absolutely.
But is there anything that we missed? Something else you want to share?
Nothing too huge. I guess my only thing is, something I've been thinking and kind of mulling over a lot lately is, what it's like, what it means to be a DJ in this streaming world. Some DJs are all about it, and some like me have been kind of struggling a little bit to kind of find that same passion for the streaming. And I guess don't forget about us. If we don't have a weekly stream, we're still practicing and doing our thing. And I think sometimes it's okay to pause and reflect and think about, like Lauren said, what are your goals? How do we want to use our time now to get us there? And I think it hit me over quarantine when I was feeling extra emotional that I realized part of that emotion was coming from I hadn't really played a gig out in months. And that was a huge way that I connect spiritually, emotionally as an artist. And, I was bickering with certain people that I never used to bicker with. And I'm like, gosh, I haven't DJ'd in like 5 months out of my house, and it's affecting me. So, just trying to make sense of my relationship to the music and the people that I care about on the dance floor in this new moment we're in.
That's great. Well, I know that me and Lady D have a date coming up, and I think the next warm weekend we're going to be doing some stuff in my place, and everyone will benefit from it. So if you haven't heard this lady spin, you'll be tuning in on that night for sure.
Absolutely.
So I want to thank you again for being here, Vitigrrl. I really love you. I appreciate
you.
The great
much
show.
Love for you all. Thank you.
Yes, and
where can we hear your music? Can we hear you have
my website is vitigrrl.com, and I have all of my mixes up there, and I also have some of my audio work, so you can hear a story that I actually did with Lori Branch and the women of Executive Suite. A lot of the content came from an interview at Vintage House. So you can also hear some of my other audio work there. I'm also on SoundCloud at Vitigrrl. I'm actually going to drop a new mix either tonight or tomorrow morning that I worked on today. And if you check it out, you'll really hear kind of what Lori was talking about, some of that open format. It gets a little housey, but it also has, I was thinking of how to tag it, and I didn't even know what words to describe it as. So that's kind of where you can, and Vitigrrl on Instagram, you can check me out.
All right, good deal. All right, y'all. Well, we'll be back next week. Kevin, you've got a special guest coming next week. Do we know who it is? Is it a secret? Do we wait?
No, we always play it up with intrigue and tease it out. So it's a DJ. That's all I got.
All right, we'll stay tuned. Yeah, this is a DJ, and we'll be back next week, same time, same channel. Vitigrrl, Lauren, Kevin, aka Mega. Love you guys. Love you guys out there. And just like Vitigrrl has a place, you have a place too. So we love you guys, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next week.
So good to see you guys. Be
Great
safe.
discussion. Be safe, be well, mask up.
Yes. Bye bye.